I guess, should I take over at this point for the next half hour?
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. Well, hi everyone. My name is Marty Miller, and let me share my screen here. Today I wanted to talk about a little bit about my photographic practice, but then also how this is it full screen? There we go. Yeah, today I wanted to well, I've been brainstorming about ways that image making practice, and particularly the encounter that you have when you're taking a picture, can somehow be equated to or enabled or heightened or maybe advanced through a series of practices of having doubt or uncertainty, which themselves might be congruent with a larger social sort of emotional context that we're living in. About me a little bit, I'm an artist, well, a photographer by training, but the last couple of years I've been living here in Hong Kong, doing research with the university about basically about photographic encounters, and particularly how this can relate to an embodied experience of home. And if you've been paying attention to the Hong Kong context, what's been going on here in the past year, this is a pretty relevant issue about how home can be expressed, and then how a sense of home can be manipulated visually from other powers that are involved, that have their own private interests. So yeah, first I thought I would give a few examples of some of the one recently that has to do with the experience of the encounter in itself. 2 years ago from a number of years in South Korea. So some of the pictures and references I'm talking about today, but I feel that it's relevant to the contemporary situation here in Hong Kong. Oh, there you go. Okay, so I thought I'd have 3 parts to talk today. First, I'd be talking a little bit about the context of looking and taking pictures in everyday practice, and then also methods for potentially having a different interpretive practice to specific imagery, how that you might encounter by accident in daily life. And then last, I thought I would give an example of how I'm trying to use doubt and uncertainty and my applied studio art practice, and how I'm trying to induce experience of defamiliarization with specific objects in the world. So this quote here is from one of my favorite authors, Philip Flusser, and it basically says, a philosophy of photography is necessary for raising photographic practice to the level of consciousness. And this is again because this practice gives rise to a model of freedom in the post-industrial context in general. Now, one reason I like this quote is because well, Flusser, he doesn't really say you should stop taking pictures. He basically sort of envisioned the future a little bit and saw that at some point, that there was going to be like an oversaturation of visual representation in the world, that everyone is going to have a camera at their disposal. Everyone is going to be taking multiple pictures with it a day. People will potentially start to communicate through, hieroglyphic kind of emoticon type of things instead of typing out text itself. And so he thought, okay, well then what is the real, then we need to understand what is the function of this imagery in our day-to-day lives. Because from his point of view, it's very easy for the photo taker to become a function themselves of a larger technological, social apparatus, which is kind of conditioning their way of viewing the world. And when I say apparatus in this context, the apparatus could be the camera or the phone that you're holding in your hand. It could also be, you know, the design decisions that went into creating a certain kind of, you know, angle of view for a camera, or a certain kind of filter for a camera, you know, like an Instagram filter, or design decisions that went into prioritizing user engagement, user interaction, instead of users developing user awareness of the phenomenological world, of the material world around them. Yeah, so basically, I also want to just ask a question, and if you guys could ponder it a little bit. And I am just really curious how you think we're using uncertainty, we're using our emotions of uncertainty, if we have these emotions about the future these days, you know, how we're using these emotions to represent the world around us in the images we take, and then the images we share, and then the narratives that result from these. So yeah, let's see here. Okay, so essentially, my stance for how I go about engaging imagery is I try to have an awareness of my body, an embodied stance within the world, and at the same moment I try to be aware of the object of my fascination, the thing that's calling me out to represent it visually with the camera. And then I also try to foster an awareness at the same moment of the camera viewfinder, or the screen on the camera or the phone. You know, how is this potentially being represented? And at the same moment, I try to intuitively hold on to that feeling of, okay, what brought me to this image encounter to begin with? I call that experience, something that potentially co-arises. So, all right. Okay, so following from the Fusser quote, and I feel a little bit following from what I heard Michael present in the last discussion, was that there's a certain, you know, post-truth context, and that this, you know, in my case, this could manifest itself through the marketing of attentiveness to to having the camera itself play a certain function in people's engagement with their surroundings. In this slide, there's 4 pictures, and I took these pictures over the course of a couple seasons, the photo and imaging convention in Seoul, South Korea. Now, in this imaging convention, basically, it's largely a chance for marketers to find out, okay, like, how do their target audiences engage with the products that they're marketing? And so often it's middle-aged men who go there, and they tend to use these lenses and cameras on display to take pictures of scantily clad models, you know, which then they use the self to sort of, you know, have a voyeuristic facet themselves from the world, I feel. And I would call this photographic hunting mindset, where I experience it a lot too, where I'll go out every day and try to shoot. And in the beginning, I'll realize that, okay, I might take some pictures, but then when I look at them, I realize that essentially I'm trying to capture the thing that I already had in my mind, that I'm looking for something in particular, and that maybe the results I get are not really representing that the immediacy of an unplanned experience that I could have had with my surroundings. So basically, what I'm going to try to do in this talk is lay out a little bit of a different potential for how to de-link yourself from this photographic hunting mindset. So, okay. So basically, I feel like the marketers in that photo and imaging convention are relying on humans' innate drive to represent the world, to harness it and feel some degree of control over it through pattern recognition and the desire to externalize something that they feel, that they're feeling, and then therefore it gives them a certain degree of agency over their lives once they represent it. So for me, I adapted a really famous or well-known graph about representation here to basically show the relationship between, the photo taker on the right and the person who views the finished photo on the left, and then the object to photograph on the top, and the finished photo itself on the bottom. And in between the two on the vertical axis is that representative plane, that potential encounter when you engage with something where a photo could emerge from it that you're satisfied with. And essentially, I don't feel there's very much wrong with the representative urge, in general. I think it goes the whole way back to Plato, to the Greeks, that, it helps us facilitate an organizing or communicating of the world. Without it, we wouldn't really have much of a civilization. However, at some point, the visual representation of something could be an obstacle to encountering the world haptically or through touch, because the symbol of the thing is essentially not really the thing itself. So one of my goals for my practice is, how can I decrease a sense of physical alienation from the world? Because I do photography, it's part of my practice. And how can I use this practice where essentially I'm not touching the world, but how can I use it to actually bring me in closer contact with it? So for me, one thing I use is doubt, to redirect my attention, because I'm really prone to this hunting mindset. And I usually experience doubt as just uncertainty about what I should be photographing, I'm pretty confident knowing that, okay, I should be taking a picture, these days, but of what, and when and where necessarily, I'm not sure. So this quote says, "We engage with the world with habit-laden ways of apprehending that are developed in the course of our lives." So, this takes a little bit of a nurture over nature point of view, in that our attention, what we consider to be normative about what we can expect to see from the world, is to a large degree habituated, learned through society. And this causes, one theory is this helps to cause perceptual blindness. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever taken that invisible gorilla test from the late 90s, where a bunch of people are passing a ball in a room, and you're just asked to follow the ball, to pay attention to, have tunnel vision to this ball, to pay attention to it. And, okay, I'll give it away. A dancing gorilla comes out and wanders around the scene. And the vast majority of people who take that test don't see the gorilla, because they're so focused on what it is they're supposed to be looking at. So for me, the doubt, how I use doubt in my practice, has a really interruptive effect on that tunnel vision. Especially if I start looking for photos, and I have a certain discursive thought process where I'm thinking about something, I'm not even really realizing it, or I'm reacting to something that's happening around me, and then that makes me have an opinion and judge, and then maybe my body will get really tense, and then that'll spark other thoughts. It's a little bit similar to, if you guys have ever done Vipassana or mindfulness training or something like that. It's a little bit of that kind of awareness. But, essentially, like, I'm trying to understand how this could be interrupted. So one thing I do is I question the intent of my intent to reproduce, to take a picture in this moment. If I feel like there's something I want to photograph, first I'll just ask myself, am I sure? Am I really sure that this is something that's really calling me, or is it something that I feel like I have to accomplish? I have to be goal driven, and I have to, hunt it, kill it, take it home, print it out, look at it, the end, So the effect of this is, often when I question my intent, is that it has the effect of trusting my intuition more about when I can push the shutter button. So another technique I use is I often wait for permission. Sounds kind of hokey, but if I really feel connected to a certain thing or a certain object or a certain scene, and I really trust that this is something I want to represent visually, then I just realize I have to be with it. I have to spend some time with it. And if I've interrupted my thought process and become more aware of my body, I've usually realized that I kind of have to wait until I feel like I've gotten permission from the thing itself, even if it's like a piece of garbage on the street, right? That somehow I'm sufficiently present with it so I can represent it in a way where I'm not really trying to control it, to manipulate it too much, but that the image itself can emerge a bit more organically from this encounter. Because my goal ultimately is to recognize the moment when the photo taker is, present enough, when I'm present enough with the subject to represent it. I don't know if you guys have ever read Zen and the Art of Archery. Got a really old, famous, book that was written for a Western audience that basically tried to, it was basically saying a similar thing about how do you not try to control the scene, and how do you let the scene emerge in a way where you are just kind of a conduit of the picture that needs to happen. So for me, this tends to bring me back to my body, back to my breath, enables a bit more of an embodied state, you could say. And while I'm in that state, I feel like I'm sufficiently present with the environment around me. And then the camera is less of a barrier between me and the world, but then more of a tool for, connecting with the world. Other techniques I use in my practice which help are, I do a lot of analog photography, and I guess, one reason that this is useful is because I don't get representative feedback. I don't get visual feedback right away. There's no screen to tell me what I've just captured. So yeah, and it also tends to slow me down. And when I get slowed down, there's a greater possibility that I can remember to inject some uncertainty into my practice, and then through that, then be more present with what's emerging. Also, something I do is I use multiple exposure photography techniques sometimes, because I guess this harkens back to narratives, part of a specific designed intent, conscious or not. How are they part of a designed intent from the photographic industry, or from a certain kind of relationship between how we receive our images through technology and then how we reproduce it? So when I do multiple exposure photography with using analog cameras, I tend to, you know, give a few minutes. I take the first shot and then just try to be in that in-between state, and then keep in mind what has happened, the first shot that I took, and then recognize my kind of almost my habitual drive to create a specific narrative, you could say, like you know, like there would be a picture of a, you know, of a little kid, and then a picture of a spilled ice cream. Okay, that's the simple narrative, right? But then how much of that habit to create narrative in that way is itself, you know, a residue of this a designed intent that I grew up with. So, okay. For example, this is a multiple exposure image where I took about an hour to make 3 pictures, and I forgot what was on there beforehand. Another reason I use analog photography is because there's more chances for it to mess up, more chances for it to not turn out how I want. Like this picture on the left, you can see the, you know, the last picture on the roll, okay, when it came out half developed. And I'll show someone using the accident in a positive way in your practice. So again, this is the overview of what I had talked about, my body, relationship between my body, the object, recognizing the camera view, what's in the camera view, and yet trusting them from this experience. So, excuse me. One way that so one way that I work with this experience also is by trying to conceptualize it as co-constructed, you know, not giving the object itself too basically saying, okay, well, like, I'm attracted to this. In this case, this picture on the right is a piece of styrofoam garbage that's washed up ashore in South Korea, where I used to live. And, you know, I did, but there I found it, was walking along the beach, and I found this, you know, seemed really out of place. And potentially because it seemed, I felt like, all right, well, I'm seeing this, yet somehow I also feel like it's dialogue here. It's also seeing me. Yet here we are. And through this encounter, there is a picture here, and I can feel it. And yet it's a co-enabled event between me and the object. So at the same time that I'm finding something, I also so when I do, I also work with a lot of found photos, because I feel like these photos kind of exist on the margins of society, and therefore they allow me to think more deeply about how or learned or habituated. I feel like found photos represent something very familiar. Of course, you know, maybe if it's a picture of a little kid, okay, it's a little kid. But then I also lack a lot of knowledge about that emotional context or the intent of the person who took the picture, or a lot of other things that created that scene. Therefore, am I really sure? How much am I really sure that I know what to make of this found picture? I have a lot of doubt about it, actually. You know, the picture is very present. It's maybe in a material form. But it's also like, it withholds more emotion and more information than it reveals. So here's a couple examples from a little town near where I was born in southern Indiana. And they're basically like shows, okay, like a couple themes in photography that I think are still relevant today. And on the right, you see the girl in a posed shot, and she's looking at representations of women. Okay, like it's obviously posed. But, you know, it seems sincere. It's probably a little kid. They're not necessarily that good of an actor. And on the left, I feel like it shows a little bit of the inadvertent kind of way of representing that can come without realizing it, where these found photos could end up having could end up reveal allowing for someone who's interested in it to have a few more insights into about how they're really made, what's actually created these. Here's another one that I found in Florida, and it's a picture of the Apollo moon, the first moon landing, and it's taken from a guy's sofa, and it's right when the lunar module landed, and it says, you know, the lunar module, the man has landed on the moon, you know, and in the bottom left corner, you can see a little bit of the armrest of the sofa. And so this is a very iconic event. It really, you know, compresses time in a way, you know, from 50 years ago into still seeing very, it's evocative of very specific emotions in the present as well. Yet it also conceals, I feel, a lot more about the emotions behind the intent to photograph this than it reveals. Another example, this is from an exhibition I did in South Korea 2 years ago. And it's basically a bunch of vacation photos that were taken from a Korean family as they traveled across the US. And in the exhibition, I just revealed the text on the back. And I tried to you know, the information that I think people really wanted to see. Here's some more examples this is some pictures I've been collecting the past year at iPhone stores around here, and Apple stores, sorry. And I find these pictures on the iPads, the display iPads, and in a sense, they're very revealing. They're very, you know, it seems that the intent is quite clear. However, to me, they instill a certain degree of doubt, because I wonder, okay, like, are the people who is the urge to use the camera this way just merely a function of alliance that you enter into when you walk into the Apple store, you know? There's you know, a lot of resources go into understanding how to make people use the device in this kind of way. Yet I also found it interesting to see that, okay, this also happens inadvertently. So where is the line between what Flusser called free will in that sense, or freedom, you know, to represent yourself or to represent something using this device? Where's the line between that and still a function, a larger, a cog in this larger system of drive to represent the world through technology? Man, looks like we only have 2 minutes left, so I might actually exhibition I did, but if you guys have any questions, now's the time. I'm sorry, I guess that flew, but I did want to just really quickly say, you know, like, I'm just really curious how you guys are representing the world during this uncertain time, and how if you feel a sense of doubt or uncertainty about the future or about, you know, the present itself, like how you work with that, how you represent that in the photos you show to your friends. The photos on the left are themes that I see, you know. The photos on the right are ones that I feel like are more indicative of that feeling of uncertainty, where the film got damaged a lot when I was traveling back from Florida to Hong Kong, because I had to take a lot of small flights, and I got x-rayed a whole bunch of times, and then the film had been defective. Yet somehow I feel like there's a certain kind of emotional state that's more true. So yeah, I guess we have 1 more minute, but yeah, about how you express this uncertain experience that we're going through, or how you potentially use doubt in your day-to-day life to cope, please get a hold of me. Here's my information, and my website if you want to see some more pictures. So, Ish, do you guys have any questions or feedback? Oh, okay. Oh. Because I've been walking around my neighborhood and I've been finding small streets and alleys taking pictures of art, small things on the ground, even signs of COVID. Yeah, I'm really curious, like what those signs are to you, Jackie. You know, like how you represent that, and like what kind of what kind of emotions you have around that. Yeah, please send me an email. I would love to see it. Love it. Yeah, it's 11, guys, but okay, I guess I'm done. Thank you. Mm-hmm.